evening and welcome to the Township of Lopatcong Planning Board meeting of July 2019. At this time, I'd like to invite you to join us in a silent moment of prayer, followed immediately by the oath of allegiance to the flag of our country. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, I'm required to state that adequate notice of this meeting has been provided indicating the time and place of the meeting in accordance with Chapter 231 of the Public Laws of 1975 by advertising the notice in the Star Gazette and the Express Times and by posting a copy on the bulletin board in the municipal building. Beth, may I have a roll call, please?
Yes, members Clymer. Here. Coyle, DeVos, Fryer.
Here.
Weeks.
Here.
Mayor Mengucci, Vice Chairman Fishback.
Here.
Chairman Van Vliet.
Here.
Steinhardt. Here. Litvak.
Okay, we'll proceed right to old business. Has everyone received a copy of the minutes of the June 24th, 2019 minutes? Any questions, revisions, comments?
I was absent, so I'll be abstaining.
Okay.
Same here.
Okay. All those in favor of approval?
Aye.
Opposed? And the 2 abstentions is noted. Minutes are passed. Okay, we'll move right on to new business. Precast Manufacturing Company, Block 100, Lot 6.02 for a completeness and hearing. Was the applicant here?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Bill Edelson representing the applicant this evening. We have one witness, which is our engineer, Robert Zetterbaum. This is an application for preliminary and final site plan approval in connection with a 725 square foot addition to Precast's office and manufacturing facility, together with the construction of 10 additional off-street parking spaces. I think for the purpose of ease in presenting this application, and since we do have reports from both the engineering and planning departments, I would just like to have Mr. Zetterbaum sworn, and he can address comments in connection with those reports, and perhaps then we can expedite the application that way.
Absolutely. Please rise and come to the podium.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly affirm or swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay. Please spell your last name for the record.
It's Z-E-D-E-R-B-A-U-M.
Thank you very much.
Bob, have you ever been qualified as an expert in the field of civil engineering by this board?
Yes.
Okay. Council, would you like to hear Mr. Zetterbaum's qualifications for the record, or Mr. Chairman?
Necessary? I don't think so. We've had him before. I recognize him.
Thank you.
So
Yeah, a little less hair.
he's recognized as an expert witness.
Okay, Bob, you want to give an overview of this application, and then we can get into the professional's report.
Sure. And then I've got some drawings we can put up on the board if you'd like, but this is a very simple application tonight. We've got a piece of property which has been subject of various site plans for the last 20 years or so. It has had variances provided on that with regard to impervious coverage, for instance, and the landscape buffer. And all we want to do is add between 725 and 750 square feet of building to the end of what is out there to make it a little bit easier for the employees. He's not planning on hiring anybody. Right now, the guys are sitting to a office, and these offices are about the size of this table here. I mean, they are small. So he figured with the 750 feet, he can get 4 small offices, but at least it would give people their own little space versus being doubled up. We had submitted a full site plan, which I thought was fairly complete. Both your professionals had some comments, which we took care of numerous comments on them, but they still have some additional concerns. Basically nothing of any consequence. And outside of a couple items that I do want to discuss with the board, we'll take care of whatever your engineer and your planner wants. And I said, there's a couple items I do want to discuss with the board to see if you're in agreement with me or not, that these items need to be done or not.
Mr. Zeiderbaum and Mr. Edelson, maybe before you go, do you have an exhibit you can put in front of us here? And face it to us so we can see it. I'll invite Mr. Betts to maybe move up so you can see it as well, since you're the only one here. You can pull that out so the entire board here can see it. And you can shift over to you and Brian if you want. You pull your chair up, John, if you want to see better.
All right. Well, maybe just for the sake of the record, if you could, identify what that is that's on the easel, and then perhaps mark it as A1 with today's date and your initial.
Sure. This is sheet 4 or 5 of the drawings that were submitted with the package, the site plan package that came down to the board. This is the whole precast site, which is located on Strikers Road. I think everybody's very familiar with the site. And this application tonight is this little piece right here of building. That's all we're talking about. Everything else exists. This is the structure for precast. They've got some outbuildings for construction, and then a lot of the rest of the area is strictly product that they are manufacturing and waiting for delivery. And as part of the application, we did look at the number of employees, and even though we don't have a parking situation on site, we did not make the ordinance requirements for parking, so we did add in 2 additional areas, which increases the parking to meet the ordinance requirements. This used to meet the requirements, but I said your ordinance, I think, changed from the time we originally constructed the first phase of the site plan, which again goes back 15, 20 years, I guess, at this point.
Bob, can you identify what variances are necessitated by the site plan application?
Well, the one variance that we had been given prior had been the variance for impervious coverage. And what we did was whatever area we were constructing here, we removed blacktop from alternate sites so that we make the impervious coverage based upon what had been approved, so we do not need a variance for that. We also had received a variance years ago for reducing the landscape buffer along the property line, and we're maintaining that what we're doing is really not, it doesn't require any additional landscaping as part of the package. And that's something we'll discuss when we get to the engineer and planner's reports. Yes.
Just the first 2
Yeah.
paragraphs.
All right. Now the required variances, we had originally received a variance to construct the building closer to Stryker Road, but there's a little notch here. We decided that it would look better if we actually constructed the addition even with the building that's out there. So we do need a variance for the
Setback requirement?
It's about a 5-foot variance to allow us to construct this even with the front of the building. The landscape buffer, we provided a buffer between the building and the adjacent property line, and because of how we're constructing this, a variance is needed for that distance to the property line, to the driveway basically next door. Then we've got a waiver, I should say. We've asked for a waiver with regard to providing a landscaping plan. But again, based upon the fact that we're constructing a very, very, almost an insignificant portion of the building, we didn't feel that, needing to buffer it was terribly important. So we have asked for a waiver on that. Now, I know your planner has some comments with regard to that, and that is one of the things I do want to discuss with the board, because, if you go along with him, then we'll plant it. If you go along with me, we won't, It's as simple as that. But as I said, based upon what we're doing, I really don't see what we're actually landscaping here.
Well, what bothers me is that since you're a conditional approval in this zone, and you've been determined that you're grandfathered in on what you have there already, that you're now planning to expand what you have there already. So normally, if we grandfather something, it's fine to be grandfathered, you can conduct your business. However, we don't allow you to expand your building or your footprint or anything like that, so.
Okay, well, again, if you want the plantings, we'll plant them.
I'm not talking the plantings, I'm talking the actual building you're gonna put on there. And what are you gonna do with the stormwater?
Well, again, we do not meet the requirements for any kind of stormwater management. We're less than the required square foot area of disturbance. The impervious coverage is less than is required by the state, so, and your ordinance, so.
I understand that you're grandfathered in on that, I have no objection to that. My point is, we have a whole new stormwater management system in the township, and the Highlands has enforced it on us. We're kind of committed to them to use the best practices of stormwater retention on your property. I noticed on your original plans that you had anticipated to put the stormwater into a dry well of some
Right.
kind, and you realize you're in a karst area here. So we don't usually allow re-injection into it unless it's gated going out, so what's your proposal to satisfy that?
Well, again, it's our contention that based upon what we're proposing here, that nothing is needed. And I believe,
But you don't have a stormwater management plan up to date
no,
for the entire site?
no. Well, again, we have the plan that originally took care of the property. There's an underground system located in this area here, and then there is a basin that's located back here, and that was pretty much covering the site that was built out to date. Now, it doesn't take care of the 725 square foot additional building that we're putting in, but because we're taking away blacktop in the difference that you have on runoff is negligible. Because as I said, we're actually slightly less in impervious coverage than we are presently. Which is really, what my whole point is, that, we're not changing anything on site, per se. If you want some kind of stormwater management, again, we can give you a below ground system. I know you don't particularly like them. We can put something in that's.
Well, it'd be something that we could review and bring us up to standards. I mean, all of your approvals are pre-Highlands.
Well, again, we also did apply to the town to get an exemption on the Highlands. And by the way,
That doesn't take care of our commitment to using best practices here.
Sharon, I have a question. So they meet prior stormwater management requirements that they were grandfathered into, but they do not meet today's best practice
Correct.
standards. So if they're going to add an extension on, doesn't that mean that the this site will be required to meet today's
That's
standards
that's
because
the point
it's
I'm trying
altering
to
the,
get to.
yeah, okay. So if you alter the site in any way, it kind of you were ignoring the fact that you're grandfathered in because the site with the extension hasn't been grandfathered in because it's different. So therefore, it cannot be required to meet today's practices because it's no longer the same site.
For the addition or the whole site?
Well, when you add the addition,
Right.
that has not been grandfathered in because it's not part of the site that has been. So if the old site met standards, or prior standards that have been grandfathered in, once you add the addition, it changes the dynamic of the structure.
So you
And
want a system
therefore,
for the whole site?
the practice is, that doesn't meet today's standards. That's what-
Chairman, if I could chime in.
Yes.
In our technical review letter, I had mentioned, that there was a dry well proposed on the site plan, prepared and dated, last revised April 17th. So I had mentioned, obviously, to Mr. Zetterbaum that obviously in a karst area, you don't want to do a dry well. And I think maybe the intention or the thought there, putting that on the plan that was submitted to the board, was addressing specifically the area of increased impervious, in addition to offsetting the increase by removing some gravel storage area on the property, which is also shown on sheet 4 of 5. As far as providing a BMP, a best management practice, if the board is so inclined, I would recommend, rather than a dry well, which could cause a sinkhole in 1 year, as we've seen on some sites, or in 10 years, as we've seen on other sites, provided some type of lined bioretention or vegetated swale or something along those lines that would address the increased runoff from the increased impervious with the new building. I don't think this, if based on our current ordinance, and that's been approved by the Highlands, if this was a major development with 1 acre of impervious or a quarter acre of increase, 1 acre of disturbance or a quarter acre increase in impervious, then the entire site or the entire development would have to meet the current standard. But, it wouldn't be beyond the board's, obviously, ability, and Jim could correct me on that if I'm wrong, but since they're asking for a variance to require them to address the increase in impervious on the site related to the building with a current BMP, that would be accepted by Highlands or DEP. That would be my recommendation.
I wanted to ask you to expand on that a bit. I mean, in the Highlands ordinance, they're classified as a potential major contaminant site, correct?
I would,
I
imagine.
yeah,
yes.
and there's a list, and
Right.
asphalt plants,
I don't know that
concrete
list.
plants,
Right.
yeah. And those folks, when they come in, as I understand it, for a land development application, have to employ best management practices, and that goes beyond drainage, it's all kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my question, to what extent does this apply?
Yeah, see, I don't know if that's if the site as it exists currently, I'm not aware, and I haven't reviewed myself the existing stormwater management on the site. So I don't know if they address water quality, they might not, or if they only address peak runoff rates and volumes leaving the site. So specifically, probably the Highlands.
Well, best management practices is talk about all kinds of things,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
So,
Yeah, and then in the Highlands concern, it's mostly water quality,
yeah.
addressing contaminants, addressing the quality of water leaving the site. So that I'm unaware, and I haven't reviewed anything
Yeah.
part of prior approvals.
One of my concerns is that we have granted them relief on impervious cover, but now they are probably more impervious cover than we would ever allow another entity to come in and exercise that. I mean, we're close to 85, 87% impervious coverage.
Yes. Right. And then there was,
So where does this water go? How's it managed now with an addition? And it's this little addition, it's that little addition, whatever else they want. They're relocating
yeah, I mean, after getting,
parking facilities. Are they putting in curb and drainage in for that to contain the water off the parking lot runoff?
which, yeah, that's not currently proposed, which is one of my comments, that some of the parking areas that are proposed be curbed, to address some of those runoff concerns. But, absent having the old stormwater design or having a revised design or some type of report prepared for the entire site, I couldn't say how they're addressing current standards.
I have one thing while we're on this subject. I was going to wait till they got it to them in my letter, but when this originally started, there was, along with the application came, of course, the existing conditions plan, which showed the extent of impervious cover. At the request of the Township Engineer's Office, that plan was updated and submitted. When you overlay the two plans, at least from my humble overlaying, it appears that some of the areas that were grass in the original submission has since been gravelled to the tune of about 1,400 square feet. And the question that I raise is that the applicant has indicated that, based on his first submission, the original plan, that he was not going to increase the impervious cover over that which was there today. Well, the question is, what's today in the plan? Because technically speaking, just my looking at the difference in the two plans, it's somehow increased by 1,400 square feet without any improvements, just by doing a new survey. So that's one of the questions I had, and the applicant can address that. Maybe I'm missing something, but it appears that some between the original survey that was submitted with this and the new survey, about 1,400 square feet of green space disappeared between the two plans before any of the improvements that are being proposed here are applied. So I don't know, you can address that, because it's in my letter, it's one of the questions I raised. And that affects the amount of impervious cover on the site, but more than that, it still may comply because we granted variances for a very high amount. But the applicant has indicated he's not increasing it over what was in the plan he submitted to us. That's the only point I'm trying to make.
And I'm still concerned about the
Still
dissipation of the
runoff.
increased runoff of
Yes.
what we're going to have here.
So if you have you had a chance to compare those two plans? And because one of the things in my letter is also that all the calculations be updated, but has that been looked at?
Yeah, the surveyor who did the new survey basically has told us that we meet the requirements that were laid out as part of the variance 10 years ago, whatever. And again, we can get him to...
I'm not saying you didn't. I guess what I'm saying is I'm not saying that when you calculate all the impervious cover, though I haven't seen that calculation, that you still don't comply. What I'm saying is, though, it appears that about 1,400 square foot of grassed area is under gravel today that wasn't on the plan that was submitted. I'm asking, was that area changed from when it was approved to today? That's the only question I have.
I do not believe so. And again, the original base map that was submitted, we didn't give you a full survey. We didn't feel that based upon the insignificant part of this application, we didn't feel that an updated survey was needed. So we took the mapping that had been available from the previous applications, which were 3 or 4, put it together for a base. Whether that was, exactly, what was approved, I can't say. All I can say is that, the surveyor went out there and located literally every point on the property, and, he can put a table on showing, what the impervious coverage is, and, based upon buildings and blacktop and gravel, etc. Other than that, I don't know.
I'm not really hearing testimony here. I'm hearing a lot of I believe and I think and who knows, and I don't know.
Exactly.
I mean, the last thing I heard was they weren't increasing impervious.
Well, that's my question, is that basically what was submitted is fine. What they submitted is fine, and they showed how they're going to change it. When they submitted the new survey, though, it appears that we got an extra 1,400 square feet of gravel that isn't on the original submitted plan. And my question is what happened? But also, more importantly, the applicant has indicated that what was on that first plan, he wasn't going to increase. So if the calculations are right, there's 1,400 more square feet of asphalt, or gravel, I should say, out there than what was told it was out there. That's the only point I'm trying to make.
You want to continue with your,
Yeah, I was going to say, maybe we can continue. I mean, we know that this is an issue that we've got to resolve and get some current baseline information for the board to make an informed decision. But there are other issues too, so I don't know, George, would it be appropriate to go through your report at this point in time? And
Well, that's fine if we're to that point. Essentially, my report turned on, well, in terms of things that I would like to see the applicant address, is some landscaping. The applicant has received variances to reduce the buffer width from 25 feet to 15 feet. At least based on his own plans, there are small gaps in the buffer. And one of the gaps occurs right in an area where he intends to add some new parking into the space. And my letter recommends that he remove the excess gravel from that area and that he replace or plant the buffer back in the gap. It would probably require the planting of 3 trees to fill the gap. And I can go up to show you where it's at. The other thing is that the township has always required that if you have parking in the front yard, even when we grant relief, we asked it to be screened. And I had asked the applicant if he'd consider infilling. If you go out there and drive by, he does have shrubs in front of his parking, but they're widely spaced and there's big gaps. And my question was, are you willing to go back and just put some shrubs between what you have to just fill in the landscaping in front of the parking lot? Again, it's probably a total of 10, 12 shrubs. They'll probably fill the whole thing. And there was another area in landscaping out there, which when you drive by the property, as you're going back into town on Strikers Road, there's an area of the property where there's a retaining wall that comes out to the front where they have various storage items and everything pushed out in front. And there was no room for a buffer. The retaining wall fills the whole area. And what I was asking is whether or not the applicant was willing to at least right at the base of that wall and on the corner of the wall, just put in a few plants to screen it, just to give us a little bit of a screen in that area. And the final thing is that the one place that has never been landscaped is, even if we accept the idea of a 15-foot buffer, is the piece right opposite where the addition's going to go that currently has all the air conditioning units, the propane tanks, and whether or not they'd be willing to do a little landscaping in that area to just sort of soften things and do it. Those are the 3 areas that I've asked that they consider doing some minor landscaping. And I guess that's what the applicant doesn't want to do, but that's my recommendations on that. The other aspects really is bringing the plan into conformance, and again, these are minor. This I consider to be fairly minor. The architectural plans don't match the engineering plan for the side of addition. In other words, they have different dimensions, so I assume we get the right dimensions on the site plan at one point, and get that in that place. But again, and my other concern was the difference between the 2 plans, and that's what we started to talk about, between what was originally submitted to the board and the new survey. If I'm right in what I observed, the applicant has held out that whatever they're doing there is going to be offset by removal, which is fine. That concept is fine. The only thing that concerns me is that all of a sudden we got 1,400 more square feet of pavement that was never in the calculations for the beginning. And I guess my question to the applicant is, are you going to take 1,400, if I'm right, are you going to take 1,400 square foot of pavement off the plan to balance it back to where the one you submitted is? That's really what I'm trying to get at, because the site is heavily paved. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And those are my basic comments. Primarily landscaping. The variances, he's extending the building along the same line that exists, so that other than filling a little bit of open space, he hasn't reduced the separation between the building and the street. That's not a, in my mind, significant variance to be considered. But again, it leans toward, can we get a little bit of landscaping to soften and get that worked in a little better into the neighborhood? And it's something that we've required of all the applicants that have come in today.
George, this one's a little, I think it's a little different, all right? Because I come into that parking lot, all right, to get certain things. And here's the issue that I have every time I come down into that area. Those open voids that you're talking about are very important to us. All right, because you come down and you come into that parking spot right here at the bottom of the, you know what I mean, this parking spot. I have to look before I out on Strikers Road to see if there's a parking spot. I'm coming in there with a mason dump. Okay, I have to find that parking spot. If I can't see in there, I gotta drive that whole entire thing to find out if there's a parking spot and then back out. It's kind of unsafe.
His parking doesn't work?
The visual's important part is what I'm trying to get at. Just, you know what I mean, from our, you know what I mean, from that side of the fence. I do agree with around the tanks and the other areas that you're referring to, and I also agree with the impervious, you know, sections and stuff. But I don't know if that's the best way of looking at it from that side of the fence. It doesn't have an in and out. You know what I mean? Like a lot of parking lots have, or a turnaround. It's a straight in or back out. Yeah. You know, so in a car, well, I don't have a backup window. I have two mirrors, and hopefully nobody's getting out of their car. You know, so that's just my.
Well, it's a fair observation. Is that because you can't? That's the only place for visitors to park.
Correct, because the employees, and that's why I was having, you know, when you're looking at it from 10 more, and that was one of my things I was going to refer to was leaving this, like the section here or whatever below that parking lot as a place for us to park, or, you know what I mean, guest visitors, you know, to make it a visitor section instead of me having to get in where your employees are. You know what I mean?
Actually, what we were thinking of truthfully is the parking in the rear, make that as employee parking, so they can't basically cover up the front and leave the front for visitors and people coming in to purchase or etc. And I think that'll make things a lot easier than, as I said, having the employees park out front. Because as you said, that leaves, if you're lucky, you got a spot open.
That's like the other day I pulled in there to get some grate and stuff, and I had pool, you know, parking right by your front door.
Oh yeah.
You know, and nobody else could get out until I got out.
Well, I think what the applicant is suggesting is good, is if he has employees in there, move them to the back and open some up for customer parking.
If you're gonna do that, then I'm okay with the bushes, but the bushes are a visual.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think that's my report. I mean, most of the other comments are minor. It's trying to get the plan consistent with the architecture and that kind of thing.
I have a question.
Have you, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. Okay, so the current buffer is 25 feet, you said, and they're asking for variance to decrease it to 15.
No, they have received.
They have received.
They have received a variance to do 15-foot buffers.
Okay, gotcha.
So, I mean,
But, I'm just a little, how many variances do they need to?
They need a front yard variance because they're expanding the building along the front and continuing.
Okay, and it's being expanded along the line of the existing building?
Along the line of the
Okay.
existing building, and one of the things that happened in getting the new survey is the building originally, on the original survey, was at an angle to the road, so as you expanded it, it actually reduced the front yard. The new survey now shows the building parallel to the right-of-way, so that the expansion isn't changing the depth. We'll take the surveyor's word for it, that's where it is.
That's the only variance right now?
That's the only variance that they must have.
Okay.
And then there is a variance if you extend the 15-foot buffer from where it ends today on the sideline to where the addition is, up to Strikers Road, there's no buffer in there. And so what we were saying is that's where you ought to think about doing some landscaping and working in that 15-foot area, because it was never planted before. And so there is technically a variance for that little strip that's in there. It can't be more than 50, 60 feet, is my guess. Well, maybe a little more, maybe 80 feet, but it's not a lot up that sideline. Is where the variances are involved. And as I say, the variance for the building doesn't really change really anything other than taking some more open space out of the front yard.
Have you completed your presentation?
I think so. I just wanted to see if the engineer had
That's
any
what I was gonna
additional
ask, yeah.
comments, because I think I'm going to request that this matter be continued, obviously, in light of the issue of the stormwater retention issue that we have to discuss.
Okay, would you like to review his,
Well, Mr. Zetterbaum indicated that he would, that the applicant's willing to address all of our comments. Really, our technical comments centered on, plan agreement, like George mentioned, between the architecturals and the site plans. Also touched on just providing additional detail. Really, it's more constructability than anything, addressing requirements for curbing along the parking lot per the ordinance, and whether they would be amenable to providing that.
Well, on the curbing,
And these are things that we would discuss if
Yeah.
waivers, if there were design
what we
waivers.
would like to do, instead of curbing, is use wheel stops. We manufacture concrete wheel stops. We'd like to build the curbing out of that for those parking spaces.
And just provide wheel stops at each space?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that could be something that, the board could waive as a design waiver, of course. The other things, we recommended as far as improving water quality on the site, any areas that are able to be reduced and impervious to provide grass, also in line with George's comments as well. So specifically in the area of the 6-space parking expansion, if that area were to be curbed or provided with wheel stops, to eliminate some of the gravel or asphalt there, whatever coverage is there currently, and provide additional lawn or landscaping areas, which would help the quality of the water leaving the site. And then a lot of our comments again were specified to grading of the parking areas, just to make sure typically parking areas are designed at 5% or less, and some of those areas are a little steeper than that, so just a little grading detail will be added to the plans. And then, again, the drywall that was shown on the plans here, recommended to provide some other form of stormwater management for the roof leaders coming off of the building, rather than a drywall, because of the karst topography of the site. And finally, there's a natural gas service extension shown from the, I guess, asphalt plant's driveway. So there would be some sort of easement necessary probably from that driveway there to provide a connection onto the site to serve the existing office building. So that would have to be added to the plans. And all these things would be added, in a future submission, either through resolution compliance or through a future submission to the board. And again, construction details. And then finally, just 2 items. We suggested testimony be provided on the adequacy of the existing septic system and whether,
Well, that's got to go to the board health.
Yeah, just, an assurance or confirmation that you'd be providing to a system modification application for the increased office space and locker room space that's being added to the structure, and that the system will be modified as necessary based on the health department's review. And then finally, regarding lighting, that a waiver was required from the lighting plan, whether, just to provide testimony that the existing and proposed parking expansion to be adequately lit for safety on the site. So rather, those parking spaces in the back aren't going to be in pitch black, basically. So just to touch on those items.
I got a couple of questions on your list there, if I can, Mr. Chairman. I think the suggestion about, I don't want to get involved with moving parking, but I mean, a requirement to provide so many visitor spaces, in the front, I think that's within our purview, and that makes sense. I'd ask if they satisfy the ADA requirements for parking.
That would be, was it one space?
One or two.
Yeah, it's both the number of spaces and the layout. I
Yeah.
think that you might want to peek at that.
That we need, we need to see some additional grading information
Yeah.
in those areas. Because the topographic plan doesn't provide adequate detail for us to review that. So maybe that's something you can provide and demonstrate.
And then on the curbing versus wheel stops, the curbing is actually a drainage structure as well, so I defer to you whether that's needed or the wheel stops would be.
Well, the wheel stops could work in that they would stop vehicles from leaving kind of the paved
But they don't
surface.
stop water from
Stop water.
It doesn't stop
running,
water, but if you were
whatever,
to
so-
create a lawn landscaped area
Yeah.
that would capture that water.
I'm going to defer to you on that, but.
So that, again, it's, there's different strategies for addressing stormwater runoff and water quality.
But we should know what it is.
Sure,
right?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, currently the plan doesn't show anything, so. That was-
I think George's comments on the landscaping make a lot of sense. If we want to leave, I don't know whether the visitor parking would offset Brian's concerns or. It would? Yeah, so maybe that's the solution. If we have some visitor parking, I agree with what George is saying.
You finished, Adam?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
One last question on the drainage. When we look at the drainage, are we looking at it as some kind of system to handle the increased impervious coverage, or are we looking to bring the entire site up to present condition?
I would at least like to have a stormwater management plan put into effect that would indicate that you're coming up into the current specifications
For the whole site?
especially because if you have so much impervious cover here. I mean, we granted the variance, there's no doubt about that, and I'm not questioning that you can have that much impervious coverage, but also it comes with a responsibility is, what are you gonna do with the water from the impervious coverage? And if we're removing parking spaces, we're not providing for some kind of water management there, maybe some drainage structures or something like that, I'm sure they're readily available there. How's it work into the plan and where's the water gonna go?
Well, that's what, additional grading information was necessary for the proposed parking expansions, even as small as they are, just to know how it's going to drain and where it's going to go. With regards to the existing site and how it's addressing current water quality standards, again, I'm not certain. I guess there's some subsurface systems on the site, but I don't know if there's any kind of inline water quality treatments units. I wouldn't think so.
Oh, yeah, so we've got, most of the site is handled by the detention basin that's located in the, well, as you're standing on the road looking towards the rear, it's the back left-hand corner. There's a area there which is for detention, but
It's underground. There's no real basin. I haven't been in the site in the back of the site, so I don't
no,
really
the
know.
one in the back is there's you have the underground basin in the front, and then you've got the above-ground basin in the back. But I don't believe any of them were built for water quality.
Probably not.
So that they're strictly,
Well, if this was approved back in 2004, then that was prior
Right.
to stormwater regulations being enacted.
and again, because we are talking about so much impervious
Maybe
coverage,
something there.
doing water quality now is going to be a tough,
I understand that. We're under a lot of pressure with what we do in this township as far as stormwater is concerned. So.
I have a suggestion. I would ask Adam and George to, we don't have it in front of us, the Highlands Land Development Ordinance. Maybe you could peek at that and give us your interpretation. There's no doubt it classifies it as a major potentially hazardous site, if I have that in the right order.
It is.
It is, and they do set requirements for that.
Pollution source, yeah.
I'd like to hear the interpretation
I
of
thought
both
that
our
was one of the
professionals.
regulations under the major pollution source designation, that they require to be brought up to current standards of what we have to do, best practices.
I'm going to defer. I'm not 100% sure that you have to bring an existing system up, but I'll have.
I'm just asking you to look at it, and contact Jim if you have to.
I mean, that's fine if he was grandfathered in and it remains the same.
Yeah,
We can't force him.
understood.
But he's making changes to his footprint.
Yes.
What does that do with the Highlands? Right, what does that do to the Highlands and the best practices?
Exactly. I
That's
mean,
the
that was under the
Is it-
designation.
Is it enough of a change that it matters, or is it a small enough change where it doesn't? That's the question.
You know what, that's why I'd like to hear from the three professionals,
Right.
actually.
Mhm.
We went from several years here of having, preaching best management practices, and
No, right.
we're just gonna let it go.
So you guys are gonna do a small report on whether we're required to bring the site up to snuff or not?
Yeah, we'll review the requirements. This is the first request we've had, obviously, because this is the first concrete complaint we've seen, or that I've seen right now before the board. But yeah, I think we can look at that and discuss what requirements that the Highlands might have would apply in this case.
But that still doesn't relieve us of the responsibility of doing it as a planning board.
Well, I mean, as part of our review in our letter, there was an application provided by the applicant for a waiver from the requirement for a consistency determination, in that they were not increasing the impervious surfaces by greater than a quarter acre. So that kind of relieved them from the requirement of applying to the Highlands for consistency determination, based on the fact that they're only increasing their impervious surface, or intending to negate that increase, so not increase their impervious surface at all. That's their intent. So under that case, our initial view of this was that they weren't going to have to go to the Highlands and get their consistency and their standards applied.
I was going to say, George, you remember when we were discussing the master plan, how much effort and time we devoted to this discussion?
And there's since we're on that subject, the municipally important groundwater recharge regulations that we started talking about and then dropped into the background because the Highlands were doing their thing. That will amend the municipal stormwater regulations if this board and the council agrees and goes through with it. And there is clearly in that amendment the issues you're talking about. But it hasn't been adopted by anybody at this stage. It has best management practices, it has major polluters, it has that whole thing in it. But that hasn't formally even come before you because we haven't been able to get the materials out of the Highlands. I think we have now. And so that'll be discussed. Hopefully next month we'll be able to get copies to everybody and we can discuss it.
Well, I'm just asking that you refresh yourself on all this stuff, and then we'll hear a recommendation that's hopefully a consensus there. Mr. Chairman, is that fair? Is that?
All right. Evidently fair, I think. Mr. Edelson, you're going to make a proposal to
My
continue this?
proposal is that we ask for a continuance of the application, Mr. Chairman, to next month's meeting. If we need more time, I will let Beth know. And we also would consent to the time by which the board has to make a decision until we're back before you again.
Okay.
It would just be a motion to continue no further notice.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Don't we need to deem the application complete? It was incomplete back in April.
Yeah, we kind of skipped over that.
I thought you had, okay.
It's right to the hearing.
We're right to the hearing.
If it came to it, we were going to do that first. So,
My only question before the resolution comes up, if we're going to deem it complete, it's based complete on what survey?
well, I think we should Whether we need a continuance or just...
There's no harm in a continuance, right?
Incomplete.
No, there's absolutely no harm to it. And you've heard the completeness is really more of a scheduling and timekeeping function. Certainly council has indicated that time is being extended regardless. And the board, regardless of whatever's on the checklist, can always require further information that it requires to make an informed decision on any application. So you could deem it complete. Nonetheless, you've gone into the merits of the application at this point in time. The continuance certainly wouldn't hurt anyone to allow.
I don't think it would either, so that would be my proposal, as per
Any
Mr.
other
Edelson's
further
proposal.
questions? We need a motion on this. I hear a motion to grant the continuance.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
He doesn't have to read notice. Okay.
Again, I defer to our attorney,
Yeah, that's completely appropriate.
and that's fine with me.
Okay. I have a motion and seconded. Roll call, Beth, please.
Yes, members Clymer?
Yes.
Pryor?
Yes,
Weeks?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Fishback?
Yes.
Chairman Van Vliet?
Yes.
Steinhardt?
Yes.
Okay.
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 You let us know when you want to come back.
I will. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, board.
thank you.
Thank you.
And for the public, anyone that wishes to continue further participation in this matter, it will be continued, the hearing will be continued next month.
Continuing on, we've come to the point where we ask for public comment. John, do you have anything?
I made a couple comments, except about talking about 1,400 feet, square feet, and then the 700 square feet, that's 21 somewhat square feet.
Okay. So this is still to be determined yet. We don't know which map we're looking at or anything like that, so. Other than hearing no,
There's the footprint of the building too, which I'd like reconciled, right? So, yeah, there's a couple things, John, that have to be straightened out.
other than that, any further comment from the board members? Entertain a motion to adjourn?
Motion?
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? We're done.
I don't know.